Hello, and welcome to the final presentation submission by the Otuckerson Software Group. My name is Cordy Richardson, and I will be joined shortly by Clifford O'Key and Kyle Tucker. Our project centered around a product that we developed called the Otuckerson Business Office Suite. Our group was made up, as mentioned, by Cordy Richardson, that's me. I served as the primary project engineer and also the database architect. Clifford O'Key was our senior software architect and a primary developer. Kyle Tucker was our user interface developer and web developer. I do want to take a moment to note that we did have one more group member that started with us last semester in the fall of 2014. That was Cassandra Richardson. She was working as our integration specialist. She did not join us for the spring of 2015, but did contribute during the first half of the product development in fall of 2014. So what is the Otuckerson Business Office Suite, or Obos for short? Obos is an administrative tool designed for use by IT consulting professionals and independent developers. We identified a need to assist IT consultants with what can be painstaking and time-consuming administrative tasks. Obos is composed of three primary components. Obos's project management component is designed to organize tasks on behalf of the IT consultant and store important information like dates, deadlines, and milestones. The idea here is to assist the IT consultant with maintaining a proper record of all of his or her work for all of his or her projects. The timekeeping component is essential for our IT consultants in maintaining an accurate record of time spent dedicated to a given project. The timekeeping component will have the capability to receive timestamps for work time started and stopped, and a detailed record of all the time spent working on a particular project on behalf of a particular client. The timekeeping information would then be fed into Obos's billing system. The billing system is designed to complete such tasks as generating statements to clients, again based on the time spent working on behalf of a particular client for his or her project, and then also receiving payment information in return from the client to pay off a particular statement. The billing information will also be central for the developer's record keeping for tax purposes. When we began planning Obos's development, we wanted to focus on the use of open source tools that would allow for, free use of development tools, but also plenty of web-based assistance. The database we selected was a MySQL database. It's the world's most popular open source database and the second most popular relational database management system overall. Primary development was done in PHP, a free server-side scripting language that was designed primarily for web applications. And the application is built atop the Symfony 2 framework. It's a popular PHP framework also designed for web applications. The database, again, is a MySQL database that serves as the central repository to maintain Obos's data. The development tools that were used to develop the database was an integrated development environment called the MySQL Workbench that is also free and open source, and also a SQL server, the MySQL server, also free and open source, that allows the database to communicate via HTTP protocol. The image on the screen is a screen capture from the MySQL Workbench with the MySQL server connection. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner my local instance of the database itself, and then on the lower left-hand corner, Obos's database. The second screen capture is another screen from the MySQL Workbench IDE that now shows the Obos database's tables. In the middle of the screen, from left to right, you'll see the tables that were developed that would hold Obos's data, starting with the asset table and then client, consultant, payment, project, statement, task, and timestamps. This final screen grab is the entity relationship diagram of Obos's database. This is the visual representation of Obos's database tables and how they relate to one another. The primary table in the database is the consultant table, represented in the upper left-hand corner of the screen grab. The consultant's rows are primarily the identifying and login information. So the consultant has an email address, a login password, first and last names, date of birth, and projects. The consultant would have one to several clients for whom he or she would be working. The client, in turn, would assign one to several projects for our consultant to work on. The project would then be composed of one to several tasks that would be completed as part of the overall project development. Those tables are the tables that would primarily be used to assist with the client management component of the Obos system. The project would also have one to several timestamps. These are going to be used by our timekeeping module to assist our consultant in identifying work time starts and stops, and ultimately the number of hours to bill back to the client. Speaking of billing, the project would have one to several statements. Again, that's going to be based upon the timekeeping component that would then interact with our billing component to generate these statements. Going back momentarily, though, to our project would also have one to several assets that would be used in the project's development. Now, turning our attention back to the billing component, as mentioned, the project would generate one to several statements that would be issued back to our consultant's client. Again, this would be based on the project that was assigned and also our consultant's time that was used in developing the project. Hopefully, upon receipt of said statement, the client would issue back a payment for the consultant's time. The payment then would be able to be applied to the statement. That would be the inner workings and the database interaction of the billing component.
Hi, this is Kyle Tucker, lead developer for Obos. I want to go over with you some of the frameworks and tools behind the application. We chose to develop our application using the Symfony framework, specifically Symfony 2. Symfony is an HTTP framework for developing PHP applications. It's built wholly with the intention of helping you build applications quickly by, in its words, letting you invest in the task, not the technology. It has reusable components that handle all of the grunt work, everything from processing HTTP requests and routing and returning responses. It also provides components for basically every non-application specific task imaginable. Non-specific meaning not directly concerned with the core business functions that the application is trying to provide. This includes things like building and processing forms, logging, emailing, as well as authentication, authorization, access control, that sort of thing. Symfony is built around the MVC architecture and uses an interesting notion of an application kernel. The Symfony kernel interprets the request, chooses the controller to route to and things like that, and it determines which components of the application code need to be used, and it only bootstraps those components. And even beyond that, it uses PHP has an auto-loading mechanism that's built into the language, and Symfony uses that and expands on it to lazy load every piece of code that it uses, meaning every class and script is loaded only when it's needed. When you combine these features, the framework is huge. I think the standard edition, when you install it, is about 250,000 lines of code. But even with that, it adds virtually zero overhead to the actual runtime of the application because everything is only loaded as it's needed. Symfony also uses the Doctrine database library, which we'll talk about next. Symfony uses the Doctrine library to provide a database abstraction layer. This is one of my favorite features of the framework and probably one of the coolest examples of code decoupling that I've ever seen. It provides the means to completely decouple an application from the database underneath it, meaning the database could be changed entirely from, say, MySQL to Postgres or even a NoSQL database like MongoDB without changing a single line of application code. As a matter of fact, we leveraged this when we were building the application to use a SQLite database during development and then switched over to MySQL for production. Doctrine uses mapping protocols to translate PHP classes to their properties and directly to the database tables or the entities that store them. This includes the associations too, which is really cool. Take, for example, the client and project entities in our Obos system. You might imagine that there's a one-to-many relationship between a client and the multiple projects that it might have. In database, you'd establish this with a foreign key constraint on the client's ID field, which is stored in the projects table. With Doctrine in the mix, though, the implementation of the relationship isn't even relevant. A project has a client property, which holds not an ID or any other plain field value like that, but actually holds a pointer to the client object that owns it. And on the flip side, the client object has a projects property, which holds a collection of all of the project objects that it owns. And the lazy loading principle applies here too, so that means if you're working with a client object, Doctrine will automatically query the database to build the collection of associated projects, but only if your code actually accesses the project's property. So if the portion of the application that you're working on doesn't interact with the projects associated with the client, say like if you're just changing its address or something like that, Doctrine knows not to query for the project association, so you don't incur that overhead. Now, this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to everything that both Symfony and Doctrine bring to the table, but I hope it was enough to provide some insight into the nitty-gritty of how Obos was built. With that, I'll turn it over to Cliff so you can see it in action. Thank you.
This is Cliff O'Key from the Otuckerson Software Group. I just want to go ahead and spend 10 minutes or so demoing our Obos system that we've been working on all school year. So our team is comprised of myself, Cordy Richardson, our project engineer, and Kyle Tucker, our senior developer. And just wanted to take a minute to explain both the tools and the purpose of the Obos system. We selected open source tools that we specified on our software requirement specification. Specifically, we implemented using PHP as our programming language, Symfony 2 as our web framework, which is highly robust and very, very powerful and fun to learn. And Cordy Richardson went ahead and coded up our database model using MySQL. Well, I just wanted to take a minute and talk about why Obos. Well, both myself and Kyle Tucker, we have experience in the IT consulting industry, and we saw a need for something like this because it really makes a job of a consultant easier. We want them to be able to have the ability to manage their clients, their timekeeping, and their billing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the app. We made the look and feel pretty consistent, and we feel that it's business-like and non-cluttered. We're satisfied with the font type that we selected, and we're pretty pleased with the aesthetics of the app. So let's go ahead and assume that we're a brand new client, and we want to go ahead and sign up for Obos. So let's do it. We click sign up, and we go ahead and create an email. I'll go ahead and create a email for my former company, and a password, and your name, And we made sure that our form look and feel is consistent across the app. Industry. Okay, so we'll go ahead and register for Obos. We click OK, register now. Not now. We get a confirmation that we're registered. So let's log in. Okay, we click sign in. Okay, and this is what we get when we first sign into Obos when we're a brand new consultant. The application recognizes that you don't have any projects tied to your client. Well, the reason is because you haven't added any clients yet, so you need to add your first client. So the application obviously recognizes this, so it gives you a link to add your first client, and you go ahead and add them. And again, as you can see, the look and feel of the web forms is pretty consistent. And we try to capture as much information as we can about the client, so that makes generating the statement far easier when you're sending the billing statement out to your client. Just a dumb little note here. This isn't the real address for Lotus. They're actually part of SEIC, and they're actually located, I think, in Virginia's, but I don't remember what the address was. So, okay, we go ahead and save the client information. Now, Obos, obviously, when you're an independent consultant, you have the ability to add more than you're going to have multiple clients. So we wanted Obos to actually track multiple clients. So let's go ahead and add another one. I'll go ahead and enter another former employer of mine. These guys actually got sold, so for $300 million. See, again, make it just my local address, but the client will actually, or the consultant would actually put in the true corporate address. That again, that is used on the billing statement. So we save the new client. Well, say that I went ahead and made a mistake in. I recognize I put in the wrong address for that client I just put in. So let's go ahead and correct it. We select the correct client down here in this drop down. Very convenient. Click Edit Client. Okay, instead of 700, it's 800. Save changes. Okay, just to make sure that the changes got in there. And they did. We also have the ability, in case you have an old client that you don't want anymore, you can go ahead and delete them. So let's go ahead and delete Max IT, since they really don't exist anymore. Delete. And as you can see, it's no longer there. Okay, good. So we've created a new client. We've edited a client. We've had multiple clients. We deleted a client. Well, obviously, this stuff doesn't really matter too much unless you start billing your time against projects. So let's go ahead and create a project. And it goes ahead and puts in the client that you selected on that home page. Let's go ahead and, let's see, PHP development. Okay, and say that you got a project due date of like 6/1/2015 at 8 a.m. We use military time for these date times, so we figured it would make things a lot more convenient, and we'll go ahead and put in an hourly rate. Okay, save new project. Okay. And we return to the project homepage. It gives us our list of projects. Okay, the due date for this project is June 1st, 2015, and it's billable at $120 an hour. Well, say for these projects, you have individual tasks associated with them. Obos gives you the ability to track those tasks. So let's go ahead and click on the project. Go ahead and create a task. Okay, it's a PHP project. Actually, it's like you're building a release. Go ahead and specify that in the name. and a description. And we also gave the ability to put due dates on the individual tasks themselves. So I know that we said 6/1 for our overall project. Let's just make this bad boy due at the beginning of May by 8 a.m. We say new task. Okay. All right, so we have a project task, and when it's complete, we give the ability to mark it as complete. Well, we'll just go ahead and leave that one incomplete for now. Well, obviously, all this stuff is fine and good, but we want you to be able to track your time. So say that you go ahead and start working. You come into your office or home office or whatever, and right before you start doing your programming work, you log into Obos, you select your project, and you punch in. And what this has the effect of doing is it actually creates a timestamp in the database. And what it does, it records when you actually came in and started working on billable time. This is kind of what we did here was kind of simulate what full-time employees have as far as like a little clock in, clock out mechanism. And it makes your billing time, we feel it makes it more reliable. So obviously, when you after you punch in, you start doing your development, working on your project tasks down here, and at the end of the day, you punch out. So let's go ahead and just take a look at that timestamp in the timekeeping module, just so everyone's aware that this is being tracked. Okay, we went ahead and punched in. The database recorded it. It doesn't have any stop time. You can't calculate any hours yet because you haven't punched out, and it tracks it. It links the timestamp with the project. Okay, so let's go back to the project, and we work and work and work and work, and at the end of the day, we go ahead and punch out. Okay, what Obos does, it goes ahead and it gives you the summary screen as to you win it for this project, which has this due date. You have this timestamp that the calculation came out to you being able to bill the client $2.40. Obviously, that'd be dumb to do something like that, but just for the purposes of the demonstration, obviously at $120 an hour and you punch out after 8 hours, that'd be $960 to bill. Okay, so we've talked about adding a new client, we've edited a client, we've created a project. Let's go ahead and create a billing statement. So we come up here, click billing. Okay, and here's the billing center, and there's no invoices, and you have billable time of $2.40. Again, obviously, this is just for the point of demoing, but say that you've worked 8 hours, and it's $960. Well, you want to go ahead and generate an invoice. You click Generate Invoice. Okay. And you want to have a due date for that invoice. Let's just give them till like July 1st to pay the invoice at 8 a.m. And you click Generate Invoice. We put in a little blurb here. The billed amount for the invoice is automatically calculated from your unbilled timestamps. So, okay, and we went ahead and did, and here's a picture of the invoice. And as you can see, it's $2.40. So that looks pretty good. And say that Lotus, when we sent in this invoice, we printed it. We sent that invoice to a printer. And they came back and they sent us that check for $2.40. We'll go ahead and add it in. Date paid. Say that they paid late. And they paid at $10.59 and they paid all of it, $2.40. Save payment. We're done. So we don't have any unpaid invoices. We got the paid invoice here. And that's basically about it for Obos. Obviously, we would have liked to go ahead and put in a travel module, but we would have been programming that until into next year because there's so much to it. Hotel reservations, airfare reservations. We figured that with the more or less lean amount of use cases that we wound up with, we have a core application for Obos. It's very functional, simplistic but functional, and we feel it would be we've developed the core of an application that definitely has use out in the field for consulting. So um, obviously there's stuff that could be added to it. Again, the travel module, maybe some tax component that would be good. Obos definitely has potential of being something great out there. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to email me at co12c@my.fsu.edu, and thanks for your attention.